Adam Rundle here, and today I want to talk to you about your master growth plan. How to go about scaling your business without breaking your business. This is by far my favorite topic to be talking about, and also the topic that I get asked the most questions about. And the questions are always like, how much money should I be spending on advertising? Or how much money should I be spending on my team? If I want to increase my revenue, how do I know how to go about that in terms of my expenses? And those are really, really important questions. And understanding what your growth plan is and how it works will give you a very clear guideline and roadmap around making those decisions to ensure that as you scale, you don't break your business. So before I dive into the detail here, I'm just going to make the assumption that you have watched the video I've created on the perfect P&L, as well as the video on optimizing your finances. If you haven't watched them, the links will be below. They're about 8 minutes each, and I really suggest you watch them before you watch this, just because the information I discuss there is kind of a preface to what I'm talking about here. And I use a lot of those references to explain how to deal with your growth plan. The second thing is, I just want to emphasize who this is for. What we're doing here is adding detail to your ideal financial model. And so this financial model is built for service-based entrepreneurs who are offering a done-for-you or done-with-you type service. You may be a coach or a consultant, whether it's one-on-one or in a group context, or you're offering a course. If you fall outside of those business models, then this financial model hasn't been built for your business. So I want to orientate ourselves around this graph, and essentially all this graph is a profit graph. And at the bottom here we have revenue, and I've made two major markers, or the examples I'm going to use: $50,000 a month in revenue and $100,000 a month in revenue. On this side, I have profits, and I'm trying to get to that 30% pre-tax profit percentage, as I've explained in our perfect P&L. And so here I've got $15,000 and $30,000, and the blue graph is our profit curve, okay? Ideally, it would be a straight line at 30% the entire way across. Reality, though, is that never really happens because we need to start investing in things before we start generating revenue. So our profit curve does a very normal growth curve as we navigate from $50,000 to $100,000 a month in revenue. The starting point, and I'm going to talk about perfection here. I'm going to talk about getting this thing perfect, and then at the end I'll talk about the pitfalls or the mistakes that people make that you can try and avoid running into the issues of breaking your business. So first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we're in the correct gear. And I've used this analogy before of driving a car at 50 miles per hour, and you're in gear 3, the perfect gear, and your revs are where you want them to be, and you're extending the longevity of driving that car. And that's what we call the perfect P&L. And ideally we would be spending 55% of our revenue on advertising and labor, which is $27,500. And we would be spending 15% on our overheads, generating a 30% pre-tax profit margin, which is $15,000. So we should be at our perfect gear. We should be exactly where we want to be. And now we want to get to $100,000 a month. And that's just an example. You can change the numbers because everything is percentage based. The first thing we do is we create the perfect P&L at $100,000 a month in revenue. The reason we do that is because we want the end in mind. We want to know where we're going. So we create that P&L, and that P&L should be broken up in the same percentages. So $55,000 in advertising and labor, $15,000 in other overheads, and generating $30,000 in pre-tax profits. Now what we need to do is figure out how do we go from where we are to where we want to be. The reality is we're going to need to start investing in the two major areas in our business, being advertising and labor. The reason is we need to spend in advertising so we can generate more leads, more clients, more revenue, and labor so we can increase our capacity so we can actually offer more and do more for our clients. You can imagine if we just all of a sudden double the spend in advertising and labor, which is still within the $55,000, so we double that to $55,000, the very next day, we're going to start breaking our business because we don't have enough money. We're going to start getting negative profitability, start running into cash flow problems. So we don't want to just all of a sudden double it in order to get there. We want to create a little roadmap, okay, a detailed roadmap of how to go from 50 to 100 so scaling this $27,500 to that $55,000 mark. And there we can create some small perfect P&Ls on maybe 60, 70, 80, 90. We create perfect P&L, understand exactly what 55% of that is, so we know how to go from 27 to our next steps before we get to the $55,000 mark. And then we will break down that into how much we should be spending on advertising and labor. To get that, you need to go watch the Optimizing Your Finances, where I really dive into detail what the ratios are between that 55% in terms of advertising and labor based on the type of business that you're running. There we now have a roadmap of how to get there. It's important to note that we have $15,000 in pre-tax profits that we can start spending immediately in our business in order to start growing without breaking it. Because if we spend $15,000 in order to start getting towards that 55, all that's going to happen is our pre-tax profit percentage is going to go down to 0. And 0 is not ideal, but we don't mind being at 0 if we know we are going to eventually get back up to that 30% when we get to $100,000 a month. And that's essentially like the investment cost that you're going to make in order to scale your business. You're going to forego profitability in order to guarantee 30% profitability down the line. That's your investment cost. And then breaking that down comes down to how you break down advertising and labor according to optimizing your finances. And so that is the perfect plan. There you have it. And once you get to $100,000 a month in revenue, you can put in your new target, show you the roadmap, and then start to scale to get there. Obviously, when you start spending this money, you're going to do a needs analysis. You're going to figure out how much money you need to spend in advertising, what kind of positions you need to fill. Then you know how much money you have to spend, and you can start allocating those resources to those different needs. And that's all part of the business management cycle that you'll go through anyway as a business owner. But now at least you have a very clear financial guideline of how to get there. So what are some of the pitfalls? Well, the pitfalls are not starting at 30% pre-tax profit margins here. So let's imagine I'm only at 10%. If I'm at 10%, I'm only generating $5,000 a month in pre-tax profits. All of a sudden, my ability to invest money to grow is now much smaller. If I do want to invest more, I'm going to start running into negative profitability. And if I'm running into negative profitability, I'm going to start running into cash flow issues, which is the one thing we seriously want to avoid. So firstly, you have to make sure that you're starting from a place of strength. Make sure you're in the correct gear before you start to scale. The second thing is identifying what is the time frame this is going to take for us to do this. Okay, if we suspect to go from 50 to 100 in 3 months, we then know that we can be a little bit more aggressive around investing in order to get there. But if we expect it to take 8 months or a year or 18 months or whatever it is, we can't be as aggressive because we need to protect our profit margins. We can't go an entire year of not being profitable because then we are seriously going to run into cash flow problems. So then we need to be a little bit more detailed around the incremental increases that we're going to make in those two areas before we get to $100,000 a month in revenue. The other challenge that comes in there is there's no guarantee that the money you invest in advertising is going to work off the bat. There's no guarantee that the people you employ are going to be perfect from day one. So there is always this time period that you need to navigate and make sure that you don't fall into the problem of expecting it to be 3 months, but it actually turns into a year. And therefore you're not profitable for a year, running into all those cash flow issues. And the third thing really is make sure that you have a very detailed micro map in order to get from 50 to 100. Break it down, 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever that looks like. Break it down, have it very clear that you can see exactly what each incremental step is so that you don't run the risk of not being profitable enough here and therefore running into those cash flow issues. So that's our growth cycle there. We don't mind losing profitability as we grow, but we want to manage that and make sure it doesn't get too low and we don't run into those cash flow issues. So I hope that was helpful. I really hope that this growth plan will give you a very clear guideline and roadmap of how to take your business from wherever it is to wherever it wants to be without breaking. If you have liked this, please share this video with those who you think could use it, and any comments are hugely welcomed. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.